Hello, my MMA true believers. I'm, of course, Jason Burgos, and this is a rapid reaction version of Back Talk to react to the inaugural Bellator rankings. Bellator finally has some rankings, long overdue. It's finally out, up in the MMA ether. The panel voting on these rankings include contributors for MMA Junkie, Fansided, New York Newspaper Newsday, Fightful, MMA Weekly, several more. I think it's a panel of about 15 or 16 different contributors to different sites. And I won't name names because I certainly have a few bones to pick with what was a solid first round of rankings. Not going to say this is an easy job. It's a responsibility to be on this panel, but it did have some questionable as all hell placings for certain fighters in certain divisions, at least in my opinion. Now, let's get into it with a little screen sharing action. I'm going to show it to you here via the official email from Bellator on the rankings. Now, let's start off with it first. We've got the men's pound for pound rankings. We've got two division champion, lightweight, featherweight champion Patricio Pitbull, who competes this weekend coming up in his semifinal match with Emmanuel Sanchez for the Featherweight Grand Prix. He's number one, fair, totally understandable. He is the best fighter in Bellator history. You got Vadim Nemkov, light heavyweight champion, number two. Gegard Mousasi, 3, middleweight champion. Bader, heavyweight champion. Juan Archuleta, bantamweight champion. I get all that. Now, the question I have and the problem I have is number 6, Douglas Lima, the current welterweight champion. Now, I get the idea of putting the other champions who have just recently won ahead of him, but Ryan Bader did just lose. He did just lose his light heavyweight title, and it confuses me a little bit because I think before Douglas Lima lost his bid at a middleweight title that he didn't have, he was moving up in a way, a unique circumstance, and losing to Gegard Mousasi in a middleweight title fight. I think we can all agree he was a consensus maybe a top 15, top 10 fighter pound for pound. He was one of the rare guys outside of the UFC that was in consideration for one of the better fighters on the planet, getting talked about as the best fighter in Bellator, along with Patricio. It's a little surprising to me, based on his incredible resume, that he goes from one of the best fighters in the world, loses to the guy you have at number 3, and then he moves on down to 6. No disrespect to Juan Archuleta. Juan Archuleta is a fantastic fighter, but he just became the champion at bantamweight in a very good competitive fight against Patchy Mix. Douglas Lima has been dominating as a welterweight to win the welterweight title and to move up to fight for another title. That one a little surprised me a little bit. AJ McKee at 7, I love that. AJ McKee, he's really become one of the best fighters on the roster. He deserves inclusion on something like this. Emmanuel Sanchez being at 9, also smart too. He's fighting in a major fight in a main event coming up that adds a lot of cachet to that main event coming up. Patricio number 1 versus number 9, and Emmanuel Sanchez, props to him. Phil Davis at 8, he's about to get a title shot, makes a lot of sense. Corey Anderson at 10, that one is a little off for me. He just got into the company. And he's already the number 10 now. If the idea is we're going off a resume from where he came from before, then that's going to open up the doors to some other questions I have. If that's the thinking here, he has the resume, he should be in the pound for pound. We're not basing off a Bellator resume. That's going to open up some other things, because there certainly were maybe some other options in other divisions, but neither here nor there. That is the list for pound. Pretty solid. My biggest issue is Douglas Lima. Now let's move along. We're going to go to the women's pound for pound rankings. Obviously, Cyborg is going to be number 1. No brainer. That has to happen. Juliana Velasquez, the flyweight champion, the other women's champion in the promotion, has to happen. She has to be there. Alima Lay, one of the best fighters, in female fighters in the promotion for years now. She has to be there at number 3. Julie Budd, likewise. Arlene Blencow, Denise Kielholtz, both good fighters, but Liz Carmouche at 7. That one surprises me a little. What are we going with? Resume in Bellator, or are we going overall resume? Because we're going overall resume, we're looking at certain things like, let me look at her page, her profile page on SureDog. We got only losses to Valentina Shevchenko, the best flyweight on the planet ever. a couple years ago in the decision. She's beaten Lucia Pudilova, Jennifer Maia, who's a top contender at flyweight in the UFC, split decision Alexa Davis in a close fight, beat Caitlin Chukagian, who's a former UFC title contender, Lauren Murphy, who's running up the rankings right now, won in her Bellator debut. So it's a little confusing to me. Is it going to be overall resume or Bellator resume? Because if it's Bellator resume, Corey Anderson does not deserve to be in the pound-for-pound rankings. But if it's resume, I think Liz Carmouche deserves to be higher than Denise Kielholtz and even Blancow, who's a very good fighter. But we're just going resume. Liz has fought more, and so that's my main issue with the women's pound for pound. Now let's move on to, we got men's heavyweight. This is where I want to lose my mind a little bit. Ryan Bader at 1, understandable, he's the champion. Timothy Johnson, congratulations to Timothy Johnson on working his way up to being the number 1 ranked guy with an outstanding run of late in the last few years. I'm hoping he gets a title shot next if that's what's going to happen. Although the whole heavyweight division title picture is in a weird spot because of Brian Bader being the light heavyweight Grand Prix. But that said, props to Timothy Johnson at 1. He deserves it. Czech Congo, close loss to Timothy Johnson. He's at 2. Valentin Moldavsky, a little surprising. Right away, where's Minikov? Minikov is not even on this list. That one, am I missing something? Did I not get the news briefing? Is Minikov not in Bellator anymore? How is Minikov not? Look at this. Let's look up Minikov's record and stuff like Vitaly Minikov's record and Sherdog. The guy has only had 1 loss. 1 loss. He lost to Czech Congo in a very close decision. He's 22-1, former champion in the division, and he's not even on the rankings. No Vitaly Minikov, but Valentin Moldavsky is 3. Now, before I lost my mind on Minikov not being on this list, Fedor is 4? Fedor at 4? I get he's won some fights, but is anybody really feeling that at this point in his career, Fedor is better than Linton Vassell, even Terrell Fortune, Steve Mowry, Matt Mitrione? Matt Mitrione was 8 and beat Fedor. Sergey Karatanov, like, I think if I put a fight with Karatanov, Mitrione, Mowry, Fortune, Vassell against Fedor at this point, I think those guys probably win. So that's a little questionable thing for me. I was a little surprised by that, but the biggest thing that really surprised me is Vitaly Minikov. Vitaly Minikov, you can arguably put him at number 1. So that's something to wonder. I wonder, is Minikov not in the Bellator? Maybe I missed the news break. My apologies for missing that, but as far as I know, Minikov has gone nowhere. And if he was free agent, he'd be one of the bigger free agents in a heavyweight, the whole heavyweight division, entire MMA right now. But let's move along. We're going to move over to men's light heavyweight. This one is fairly sound. Vadim Nemkov deserves to be 1. Bader 2. He just lost to the best guys. Fair. Phil, you could have maybe switched him because he's the number 1 contender. I understand. But Phil Anderson, going to go resume, just pure skills. Fine. We're going to go him. Leota, Julius Angliskas. You know, I'm sorry, Julius, if you're watching, I'm saying your last name wrong, but props to you getting on the list. Number 5, outstanding. Props to you. Melvin Manhoff. I mean, this is not one of Bellator's strongest division, but also, like we're going to show in middleweight, it's a division that they're starting to really get going. Also, Yoel Romero, Anthony Johnson not on here. Totally fair. I get that, and that makes sense. So, because they haven't fought in Bellator. So, one, Yoel's only fought in middleweight, so it makes even more sense. But Anthony Johnson hasn't fought in a few years, hasn't fought in Bellator. You don't want to you want to put them in. But if we're going resume, they clearly have both resume. We're just going resume and skills. They have the resume and skills. I know Yoel's not going to be in the middleweight rankings if we're going to go resume. A little confusing on the decisions of resume, relevancy, what they've done in Bellator, because it is the end. Again, the Bellator rankings, not a Sherdog rankings or a Fightful ranking. So light heavyweight makes sense. Now we're going on men's middleweight. Gegard 1. This is a pretty fair listing. Salter, Tokov, Vanderford, Edwards, Van Steenis, Eblin, Johnny Eblin, another top rising prospect, along with a guy like Vanderford, Fabian Edwards, and a lot of good prospects in this division coming on the way. This is a division like light heavyweight that's really molding into something special for Bellator. We've got Eblin 6, Charlie Ward at 7, 8 at Shipman, Romero, Cotton at 9, and Ed Ruth. Interesting. He's known for his welterweight resume, but he's fought a bit at middleweight, so they put him in there. Okay, fine. That just shows you again the lack of depth of the middleweight division in Bellator. But going back for the folks that are going to listen to this on audio, I just want to go back to light heavyweight. We got Grant Neal at 6, Christian Edwards 7, Tyree Fortune at 8, Melvin Mayhofer 9, and Alex Polizzi at 10. Now let's go on to the men's welterweight. Fair. I have a little questions, but Douglas Lima at 1. That's where the story is. He should be. Michael Page at 1. I'm unsure that a little bit. If we're gonna go look at Michael Page's recent resume and stuff like that, he's won a lot of fights. He fought in October. He won decision KO. It's fair. Again, and that's why I'm giving props to everybody who put this list together, because it is about preference. It isn't about it's personal perspective and what they feel, and it's more subjective than objective, and that makes it difficult. Yaroslav Amosov at 2, could have switched him with Michael Page. He hasn't lost yet, but maybe Michael Page has fought a little bit better competition. Questionable. Naaman Gracie at 3, you have to put him if he's not 2 or maybe even 1 after retiring John Fitch and submitting a guy that hardly gets submitted and one of the best grapplers in welterweight history. If he's not there, you gotta be 3. Logan Storley at 4, understandable, top rising prospect. Derek Anderson, Jason Jackson, who's fighting Naaman Gracie. That's a big fight for for Jason Jackson, that he can jump maybe up to 3 with a win over someone like Naaman Gracie in this fight coming up soon. Joey Davis, another top prospect. Saba Hamasi, Oliver Enkamp, and Jalil Willis. This and light heavyweight is going to be fascinating, especially light heavyweight with the bigger names that have been added. But this one is the division of the growing talent and guys on the rise, like middleweight. These two are still on the rise. Welterweight has been strong, but you can see the talent coming up on the bottom of welterweight that should be interesting in the years to come to give guys like Douglas Lima a serious run for his money. Now moving on from here, we're gonna adjust a little bit. Let me adjust my internet here to just scroll down a little bit, and I'll come back to it. All right, so now we're going to men's lightweight. Now, men's lightweight is an interesting one, too, because we have a 2-division champion. This is going to be the run for Patricio Pitbull of conversation. Patricio's at 1. He's a champion. Makes sense. Brent Primus at 2. Yeah, makes sense. Foreign champion. Only lost once. It was to Michael Chandler. He's been winning real highlight of the year submissions. The only problem with him, and I've talked to him, and you can look up my previous interviews with him, just the inactivity, either injuries or just not getting, a lot of it's Bellator having issues booking him, which has been real tough. But here's where I have an issue with lightweight. Patricky Pitbull at 2. Okay, now we're going to go to Patricky and look at his recent stats. Patricky lost his last fight. He hasn't fought in all of 2020, and I get it. Everybody got screwed by the pandemic, and he, as a guy in Brazil, it might have hurt him even more. And just like Patricio didn't fight that much, didn't fight in 2020, I believe, either. But Patricky lost. He hasn't fought in more than a year. And I get he was on a winning streak before that, but in my book, a guy like Goichi Yamauchi, now what screws over Goichi is that he's missed weight. But the guy is 25-4. His one loss in the last almost 5 years has been to Michael Chandler. Now he got Bubba Jenkins, but he lost to Michael Chandler, the champion. He's beat Daniel Vaisho, a very good fighter, subbed Syed Awad, subbed Darren Cruikshank, subbed Adam Pucciolati, another one of the best grapplers in the division, subbed Ryan Couture. Patricky, I mean, he's done some good things, but I don't feel like the names on his resume are quite as good. But yeah, I get it. Benson Henderson, split decision. Derek Campos, you knocked out. Roger Huerta, Kawajiri. I mean, for me, I would lean more towards Goichi. But if you want to say, hey, Goichi, you screwed yourself with the missed weights twice, totally understandable. Though that's an interesting. Part of me thinks he had COVID and it had it in the early days. Benson Henderson at 4. I guess, if he's there's losses, it's to some of the better fighters of the division. Sidney Outlaw's on the rise. Miles Drury, good signing from the UFC. Piccolati, like I mentioned. Alfie Davis, Aviv Ghazali, and Georgie Karahanyan at 10. Props to Georgie being in there, still being relevant after all these years. 3rd run in Bellator, still doing it in multiple divisions. Now, men's featherweight, one of the glamour divisions that we're having in this Grand Prix that's finishing. Patricio, of course, number top. AJ at 2, makes sense. Manuel at 2. If you want to switch him, it's a fascinating thing. You want to switch Emmanuel above AJ, but, AJ is the most talented guy, arguably, in the division, along with Patricio. Got Boric at 3, Pedro Carvalho 4, Daniel Vaisho 5, Aaron Pico, J.J. Wilson, Jeremy Kennedy, a nice signing from the UFC, Tywin Claxton, high upside guy, Mads Burldell. Little surprising that Caldwell isn't on this list. I guess that's a sign that he's definitely going back to bantamweight. That makes bantamweight that much more of an interesting division on the rise. But no Caldwell, a little surprised by that. Anybody else that was left out? I mean, I don't think Campos is on here. He was in the Grand Prix. It's interesting. There's a couple of guys looks like that were in the Grand Prix that aren't even in the rankings, which kind of sucked for them. They lost to guys in the Grand Prix that are top of the division's ranking, but not in the rankings. That they lost, but they still lost to some of the best. But that's an interesting decision by the panel to leave some of those guys out. Campos, I'm forgetting another name. I think that maybe Carvalho beat in his opening round fight and hasn't fought since. I don't know. I could be wrong. I got to double check again. Hard job. Props to them. Not taking anything away. It's a tough spot, but there are some things I wonder about. Men's bantamweight. Juan Archuleta got to be 1. Sergio Pettis got to be 2. He's fighting Juan for the title. If we're going resume, and even maybe a little bit of what they've done in Bellator, it makes sense. He should be there. Patchy Mix totally deserves to be right there, because I was thoroughly impressed in person to be there for Patchy versus Archuleta in the title fight, and Patchy was great. And I'd never seen such a young fighter get just be maybe outgunned in terms of overall experience because of the technique from it, and still just heart his way into making it close by the end of the fight. Still lost, but Ralphie Stotts, props to Ralphie, another big-time prospect on the rise, coming up number 3 over James Gallagher. That's how good Ralphian is. He's the guy to really watch out for. James Gallagher at 4, Magomedov at 5. Another nice addition they've had, Leandro Higo, 6 solid, Josh Hill, Cass Bell, Franz Malamba, and Jornel Lugo. That's a tough one, because you really got to dig deep, and you have to get those picks. You gotta watch the prelims. You gotta watch some of these fights that are not on the main card. So the props to the panel to putting in time. I'm hoping they put in the time and they just didn't throw up whoever they wanted there. But featherweight rankings, it's academic. Cyborg, Bud, Blencow, Zingano, Smith, Sinead Kavanaugh, Janae Harding, Leah McCourt, Amanda Bell, Olga Rubin, and Jessie Miel. I mean, it's a weak division. This is a weak division around the entire sport, so it is what it is. They put the people that are the most notable, with the strongest resume history at the top. This is fairly easy, and you really got to dig deep into some of the late ones. And then the final ranking, women's flyweight, the premier women's division in Bellator. You got Velasquez, got to be number 1 champion. Lim Lay's got to be number 2, the long-time champion. Liz Carmouche here at 2, but this is let's see if I can go back here. Let's see if I can scroll a little bit to just double check. Denise Kielholtz is above Carmouche in the pound for pound, but you go down and Kielholtz is below her in the flyweight. That's an interesting thing. How is she pound for pound better, but in the actual division, Liz Carmouche is better? Little bit of confusion there. Something Bellator needs to look at. Alejandra Lara 4, Kana Watanabe, who has got a big fight coming up. She may be moving up the rankings. Kate Jackson, Veda Ortega, very good fighter, under almost like the Manuel Sanchez of that division. Super hard to finish, super tough, super durable. Mandy Abam, Valerie Laredo breaks in on 3 fights. I guess. I mean, if she's only 9, I'd probably put her 10. 3 wins gets you into the rankings. Maybe that's a show of the weakness in the back end division. Maybe that's a show of favoritism. Maybe she's a name. I'm going to throw her in the list. A little surprised by that. Valerie Laredo at 9s too. Just being a little surprised, but at 9 above Bruna Ellen. But fine, undefeated, a top prospect. But overall, just a general thought. Solid list. First round is solid. I would have gone a lot of different directions. Certain ones, I think there are some improvements to be made. Some questionable things, like what I just mentioned about what's in the pound for pound for the women, than what's in flyweight. Fedor doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The Douglas Lima needs to be moved up. Overall, props to the panel. Put together a good job. If you enjoyed this edition of Jason Burgos' Back Talk, you can follow and subscribe on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Player FM, and many more podcast formats.